We have yet another episode being done today for the past podcast. If you're tuning in, I do appreciate it. If you'd like to check out any previous episodes, go to Spreaker.com/Brite Podcast. Nonetheless, let's continue the show. What it is. Past podcast back at it again. Slightly was behind, but luckily caught up. I wanted to, and I had to kind of go into my, I guess you can call it a bag of tricks, because I've been running through this brain process of how these titles were going to come together, but I've been able to kind of look at it and see, all right, I think I have something worthwhile to kind of get the attention of my listeners, and this topic is no exception. I've been thinking about a couple of stories here and there and kind of discussing a few things and just addressing all that's been going on around me. And one thing that's come to mind, and this was something that I had kind of queued up at the beginning of April, if not late March. And that is what I like to call the battles and wars of life. And this is probably going to be a long podcast, but if it is, oh well. I just want to talk about it because I feel like it's something that should be addressed, but people don't know how to address it, because to some individuals, for whatever reason, every moment is a war, or I don't know how to describe it. It's a matter of knowing when it's worth fighting and when it's better to just not even take yourself through the fight. Because I'll put it, matter of fact, and I'll put it in this perspective so people can really get a true understanding of how important it is. And this normally, and I will say this because even with watching, live streamers on Twitch, it applies to me on there, and it also applies to me in real life with my personal podcast. I don't like doing political topics or political conversation, but in the same token, if it's content or if it's information, you can't ignore or disregard the elephant in the room. No pun intended. But what we're for instance, right now, what we're dealing with involving Trump, and a lot of people need to understand this, and this is, like I said, if I'm stepping on toes, forgive me, I'm just speaking my mind about this. We do not have the need or the necessity of going into a war, let alone acknowledgement of quote unquote World War III. And what a lot of people have to think about or really keep in mind is wars don't take a couple of weeks or a couple of months. They go on for years. If you look back in history and get your social studies book out and get reminded about, World War I, World War II, Vietnam War, things of that sort, it takes time. I mean, because you're coming, the objective of reaching or coming to the point of having a war is that you're looking for a sheer resolution to something that's much bigger than the war in most cases. So I'm just kind of putting that out there, just making it as a discussion. But that, like I said, that's just me kind of making a general reference, but not a overall direct reference, if that makes sense. So we as people, we go through things in life, we go through situations, and a lot of it kind of tears us down, frustrates us, etc., etc. However, you have to know when to be prepared for a battle and when to be ready for war. And it literally comes down to learning how to choose your battles. And this is with anybody. This is with friends, this is with enemies, this is with people you deal with on a day-to-day basis, everything. We sometimes, I don't know what it is or how to describe it, but some of us are just naturally ready to attack situations. And that's completely okay. And I'm saying this because I've seen it, I've experienced it, I've acknowledged it, I've been around it quite a while with some people where it's practically almost second nature that, hey, here's a moment, this is something that's going on, I want to address it, I want to deal with it, and I need to fight about it, or I need to get it out. And it's like, hey, if you want to get it out, that's cool. The problem becomes if the person that you're having to deal with, say, an example, myself, I'm not going to sit and say that I don't fight for everything, but some things you have to, I guess the nicest way of putting it is you have to know what's worth fighting for. Some people fight because they know there's a end result of the fight, and some people just, like I said, they like to naturally be prepared or ready to fight, battle, go to war, however you want to term it. So I'm addressing this podcast or stating this to you all and understanding that not every moment or not every situation has to turn into or evolve as, hey, let's go to war, let's fight this. We need to get this battle out of the way because I'm ready for war. And it's like, all right, that's cool. You want to go to war? I have no problem with that. I'm just not in a war-based mood. Now, I will handle battles no problem because I will be the first to tell you, and many of my friends have experienced and witnessed this, or I've made it addressed with them in talking about how many different wars I'm sorry, let me rewind. How many different battles I've been a part of. Because like anyone and with anything in life, you always, even though you don't want to acknowledge it, are going to have battle scars. Your battle scars and this is just general. I know some of y'all like, well, where are you going with this? Some of this is general information that a lot of people don't take into account or don't really look at. But these are things that I've seen and personally had to witness, either between work, between life, between just everything that goes on around me sometimes. And to address it for what it is, I mean, you truly and honestly have to, you can't hide or disregard a battle scar or a battle mark that you have from whatever you've gone through with someone or something. I've, told people, and like I said, many friends know what has gone on with me, where I've had situations and circumstances went through what I went through, dealt with the consequences of it, learned from it, improved, changed, and in so many words, I've talked about this before as far as rebranding, and this is, it's no exception to, like, rebranding applies when it comes to doing TV or doing certain shows, but rebranding also applies to life, whether we believe it or not. Sometimes our lives are put in a place where we have to literally rebrand and like retool or rethink the way we do things. Because if we're doing something a certain way and it's not working, we need to try something different. But the problem is, if we try something different, is that difference that we're trying going to give us a better result? The example I normally use, or what I always look at, is, my friend, one of my twin, we talk about this all the time. And I was a guilt, I was at fault for it. But when you are going through the process of what they call insanity, where you're doing the same thing over and over, looking for a different result, when in reality, it's going to be the same outcome. It is the same outcome for a reason. But you have to, again, that returns back to knowing when to battle and when to go to war. And usually those are battles that you're battling yourself with, but you want to prove. It's like you're trying to prove something, but it's really nothing to prove. And for whatever reason, and I've never understood this, and I guess it's still me learning with life, just knowing when and how war works. And you have to just literally have I guess I'll say it like this, and this might be my simplest and most direct way of closing this podcast. Get used to having battles, but be war ready. And being war ready means that in the event of you having to go to war with someone or something, that you can have that war pretty much be a here today, gone tomorrow type of thing. Because most of the time, the war that you're fighting, you shouldn't even be part of, but it arrived to that point. So now you're trying to figure out, well, what do I do next? When in hindsight, it's not about realistically what you need to do next. It's how did you get there? And, and kind of looking at it as a, what to do next. But it's more about, what do I do to avoid going to war in this manner again? Those are the things that you have to acknowledge as a person, and we sometimes don't want to acknowledge. And I love the fact that I forgot after 10 minutes of recording that it's gonna, my phone, my TV, my computer was gonna lock. But this was a topic that I truly, like I said, I felt like this was gonna be the one that I was gonna talk during, because I've been, like I said, I've had a queue of topics that I've wanted to discuss and address, but I've been like, I'm not sure and I don't know. But I think this is the one that I really needed to reach the masses on, because it's an important thing. We put ourselves in positions that we have to learn, okay, is this a battle that I'm really going to take on? Or, all right, you know what, screw it, I got to go to war. So let me go ahead and get in the mental of preparing for a war that I'm about to encounter, and either have it turn out the way it does, or face the consequences that follow. So my closing, I guess, ending or cap that I'll say to the whole war versus battles is, wars are gonna happen. You can't disregard that. You can't change it. You can't really. I mean, you can control it, but you have believe it or not, you have a lot more control when it reaches a battle stage before getting into a war. Now, some folks may look at it as the exact opposite, but you have to be prepared. Period. And I know I'm usually like that guy that's like, oh, I got a thought about it, or I got my ways of looking at it. But the reality of it is, I'll add this too, and I'm gonna wrap this up, because I know it's like, this could be, like I said, this could be a podcast that could lead me easily into forgetting that I have a place of employment. But everyone is gonna handle a battle and a war differently, and every situation is case by case with the folks that you come across. It's almost equivalent to, I would almost say it's equivalent to grieving. And this is kind of a major sidebar, but it kind of blends into it. Everyone grieves differently. Everyone handles life differently. Does that mean that the end results matter based on what others do or don't do? Sometimes. But that doesn't mean that you, I guess, turn your face up at what another person does or doesn't do because they didn't do what you wanted them to do. And sometimes we miss that, because we have to remember, people have to live their lives their way, not your way. That's why it's their life. And taking time or learning to look at it from that perspective can make things just a little bit easier to deal with. And, I'm saying all of that as to how to deal with, a case-by-case process. It's a case-by-case process with battles and wars as well. So I'm going to close the podcast here only because, number one, I got things I need to do. I got adulting that I'm not looking forward to. But it is Friday, and the week is ending, and the weekend's here. My weekend is gonna be partially relaxing, but as always, Saturday, y'all know what time it is. So my sports heads half of the podcast y'all may miss, and I fully understand, but the other half will be. I have quite a good bit of content for tomorrow. I haven't really stated too much about it, and I've kept it that way for a reason. But dang, I'm usually, and I'm good with closing, but for whatever reason, this is one of those ones I don't want to close, but I have to, only for the benefit of my sticking to my time frames, because I'm learning with as a research tip, which might surprise some people, but you have to keep an episode within a certain amount of time, and I've learned if it's within that time frame, like for my and I'll say this with my sports podcast, I don't have a limit. I want it. If it goes, it goes. If I done talked for an hour and a half, but we got a lot of good content, that's an hour and a half I don't mind doing. My daily podcast that I'm working on now, I try to keep them within a good time period, depending on the topic, of course. So I'm gonna go ahead and leave you all with that portion, and knowing that you got to know when you got to be prepared for your battles, but you also have to be war ready. But just because you're war ready doesn't mean you go into a situation or a moment in war mode first. And that's just the best way I can look at it, or how I can address it. So thank you all for tuning in. I know we are progressing through this podcast every day in April. I ain't gonna lie, I've been scared a few days and not being sure how it would go, but it's coming together, and I'm thankful for that more than anything. So I'm in limbo, and I think my podcast after dark, I'm gonna stick to when I know I have an after dark moment of conversation that can be a late podcast. But if worse come to worse, I'm just gonna stick to doing my getting up in the morning, cringing at the fact that I have to, but it's part of what I'm doing because this is what I love. This isn't just something to kill time, but this is something I've really put me into, and I don't mind the end result because it's for you all. It's for the listeners at the end of the day. So I'm gonna cap it up and wrap it up here. Until next time, Past Podcast signing out. And again, this podcast is a podcast about sports and stuff. I've been in limbo about whether I'm doing an ampersand or if we're doing the N. So I'm doing the N strictly because I don't like the ampersand fitting with the podcast. All right, I'm gonna shut up. Y'all be good, stay positive, and cue the outro. We've done it once again. We finished yet another episode. Appreciate everyone for tuning in. If you're not following on Twitter or on Facebook, please look up Past Podcast. That's PASS Podcast, one word. I am accepting inquiries for any topics or concerns at pastpodcastbt@gmail.com. And just continue to support. I appreciate all the support and everyone listening and tuning in. Until next time, y'all take it easy.